Sorry, I was muted. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Kaikia from Hawaii. We have Karen from Long Beach. We have Sherry Pendleberry from Ventura, California. We have, Lauren from New Jersey, Olivia Rena, my comrade from Houston, Texas, Carrie Klingman from San Francisco. I am calling in from Charlotte, North Carolina. Bridgett, I believe you're in DC, correct?
I'm in Oakland.
Oakland, okay, great. Nitu, another comrade of NLIHC, is in Chicago, Illinois. Shalonda's calling in from Arbuckle, Florida, as she just put in the chat. Oh, sorry. To the panelists, how am I sounding? Olivia or Bridgett or Shalonda, can you let me know?
Yeah, I think you're, go ahead, Bridgett.
I was gonna say you sound fine to me.
Okay.
Yep,
Tamara
I hear you clear as well, Kyle.
Okay, I'll just speak up. I think Tamara was having trouble hearing me. Well, as people keep coming in, we'll keep calling out names where they're calling in from. Linda Soderstrom from Rome, Minnesota. Hi, Linda. Glad to see you again. But today we have a special guest, Bridgett Simmons from the National Housing Law Project. She's a staff attorney there. We got word of a letter sent to the administration to increase funding for the Section 514 program. And Bridgett has worked a lot on that issue for the National Housing Law Project. And we are grateful for her to lend some expertise to explain some more about the program and how that can affect you all. And Shalonda is also a board member of NLIHC and the National Alliance of HUD Tenants. And she has some experience with the program as well and tenant organizing generally. And so I'm looking forward to having a good discussion about building tenant power and using certain resources from the federal government to do so. So Bridgett, I can hand it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to Coalition for inviting me here to share in the conversation about resident organizing. I'm so excited to be here with Shalonda Rivers, and hopefully Ms. Gerri will also be able to join us. You know, it is just really important to understand the power that residents have, right? And so organized residents are really vitally important to the effectiveness and the efficiency of the various federal housing programs, not only so that they properly serve those who are intended to be served, but then also to make sure that properties are preserved for a long period of time to combat displacement, and then also to ensure that these properties are kept in good, safe, sanitary, decent condition. For many, last year was a reminder of the power of organizing generally. And organizing has long been a way to elevate voices that you know, lawmakers don't necessarily always get to hear, or voices that are not always invited to the lawmaking table. And so really resident organizing is about that, empowering our neighbors and supporting them and elevating their voices, helping to create community and ensuring that, you know, valuable investments are recognized. And so when I mention and say tenant organizing or resident organizing, what am I referring to in the federal program? So primarily, I'm referring to the rights of residents as codified in the regulations. And then after I struggle with doing copy paste into the chat and talking. So, but after I get done chatting, I will copy and paste the links to the regulations for the public housing program, as well as the project-based rental assistance program. So essentially, I'm talking about the right to organize in two of HUD's housing programs. The first is public housing. So 24 CFR 964, which I'll once again copy the link to, describes the rights of public housing tenants to participate in the resident advisory board, in resident councils, and then also in the particular operations of a specific PHA. So primarily thinking about having a assisted tenant who, or a tenant who is assisted through the various PHA programs, serve on the PHA boards. So 964 talks about what that is to look like, how tenants are supposed to be protected, and the funding that is that HUD provides through the PHA that is supposed to flow to the resident councils as well as to the resident advisory boards. In the multifamily properties, 24 CFR 245, those are the regulations. And it also describes what does it look like for residents to organize at properties that are assisted by project-based rental assistance. And so that typically describes, what are the protected activities. It talks about the type of folks who are protected. So not only are residents protected, but also those who are supporting and helping residents to get organized. And then it also talks about, very sparsely how housing providers are not to interfere or retaliate against residents who are participating in 245 protected activities. And so that's a long-winded way of saying we're essentially just talking about two programs. And as you all know, HUD has many programs, many housing programs where assisted families are living in properties in which they would like to have the protection of the right to organize. So specifically, the Housing Choice Voucher Program doesn't have regulations that explicitly protect voucher families from retaliation or from interference of housing providers or the PHA from interfering with their desire to organize. And although not a HUD program, a purely LIHTC building, so a property that doesn't have, that only has LIHTC at the property, the LIHTC program doesn't have a right to organize regulations. And as with the voucher families, there are many LIHTC families who would be interested in having those protections, would want and desire to have those protections. So from NHLP, our standpoint, we have been so fortunate to partner with folks like the National Low Income Housing Coalition, with the National Alliance of HUD Tenants, to discuss these issues, to really think about how we can leverage our power to highlight these issues. And so, as Kyle mentioned, really what drew us all here together for this call is because Representative Richie Torres circulated a Dear Colleague letter. It's essentially just a letter to his colleagues asking for their support in asking for more funding for resident organizing activities. So in the public housing context, more funding for resident councils to ensure that they have adequate funding to support either capacity building programs, as well as to support the activities that resident councils take on throughout the year to support the residents who live in public housing. For the multifamily portfolio, it looks like asking for Congress to include $10 million for what is called Section 514. And Shalonda will talk about her experience in organizing in the multifamily portfolio, but just a bit about public housing. So the public housing regulations require that the PHA provide or set aside $25 per occupied unit per year for resident participation activities. That $25 per occupied unit is then further split between the PHA and resident councils. So the resident council gets 15 of that 25, and the Public Housing Authority gets 10 of that 25. Representative Torres' letter actually asked for an increase of that 25 per occupied unit, actually asking up to $40 per occupied unit. And then also asked that split, that a majority of that money actually goes to resident councils. And that's really important because resident councils can represent a specific public housing property, or it can represent an entire jurisdiction. And then in some areas, you have resident councils that represent a specific building, and there's a citywide resident council. So that means that $15 per occupied unit for public housing, they all have to split that money. And frankly, it just doesn't keep up with inflation. The $25 requirement was put in place in 2001 and has remained at that level since 2001. And obviously we know, that's just frankly not enough. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Shalonda to share her experiences about organizing and why, specifically in the multifamily portfolio, capacity building is necessary. So Section 514, it doesn't go directly to resident groups in the same way that it does in public housing, but HUD can use Section 514 dollars to help support, to provide grants, to also provide money for funding capacity building programs. And when we say capacity building, we mean providing a service, providing trainings, providing technical assistance and support to the folks who are on the ground doing the organizing. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Shalonda.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Bridgett, for that. I'm just going to tell a bit about my story. As Bridgett said, I am a tenant leader here in my community where I live in Opelika, Florida. The president of my tenant association. I am also a non-tenant organizer, as HUD describes it in section, what Bridgett was saying in section 245. Now, one of the things, as you all heard, I live in a multifamily building here in Opelika, Florida. HUD has lots of money to assist residents and organizing, right? They have the capabilities to help residents like myself who's standing on my own 2 feet as a non-tenant organizer. So what I do here, I do a lot of work, and HUD knows I do a lot of work. A lot of people are familiar with me in HUD. Also, there's 2 other buildings in my local area where I live that I assist in organizing and helping them. They do not, and actually they're the same type of buildings that I live in. So therefore, I'm able to, go and show them the way and, help them. We also have greater legal services here to assist us. But however, we all know, right, with the COVID that's going on, the attorneys are bombarded, very bombarded. They have a lot on their shoulder. So a lot of times they, if there is a non-tenant organizer like myself that's well experienced, that could help them, that could push, that's what they depend on, right? And they need help. So me, I'm out here, I'm doing all this by myself. There's no funds from HUD. I don't get that $25 as the public housing residents or advisory board will receive. I don't receive a dime. I don't receive $1. Unfortunate. And there is a lot of retaliation that I do receive from my landlord in reference to organizing. So like I say, my story is that I've been doing this actually since 2013, okay? I've been fighting for decent, safe, and sanitary housing. And actually, I fought so hard to where, I spent money out of my own pocket. And I told residents, hey, if we want to show HUD and let them know that we are not living in decent and safe and sanitary housing, and this is what this 514 money is supposed to be for. It's supposed to protect, right? It's supposed to reserve. It's supposed to protect the interests of the tenants residing in a multifamily housing project. Also to resolve problems affecting financially and physical trouble federal insured and assisted multifamily housing projects through cooperation with residents, owners, state and local governments, and other interest entities and individuals. So we are not being protected, okay? Let me just say this, my property, my last HUD REACT inspection score was 21C. If anyone know about the scores, 21C is very low, very low. So in my organizing, I told the residents, hey, look, we have to do more than what we're doing. So we went out and purchased our own mold tests. We paid $300 for our own mold tests. We went to our local city. We told our local city, hey, look, we're living in unsafe conditions here. There's mold, there's termites, there's so many other situations. So they said, well, we have to have proof. So the only way we were going to have proof, like I said, we had to spend the money of the $300 for the mold test. With all being said, they received a fine from the local city about the hazard and unsafe conditions. Once they received that fine, the fine kept running $300 a day, and it's ran for like, I believe like 2 years, something like that. Okay. After that, they put us in a hotel. Me and my family was displaced in a hotel for a whole year and like a month. Now, all along before that, I've been telling HUD, hey, it's unsafe. It's not safe. Now, remember, I am the tenant leader here, and I am telling them this. So if we would have had additional funding of that 514 to get more, other things to do, to keep, the ball rolling, I probably would not have never been in that predicament myself. And actually was like 5 other families or more that was living in a hotel, and it made it complicated. Okay. So, basically HUD is, they're failing. They're not doing their job as well. They're actually increasing the burdensome to the HUD families. HUD could step up and do more. They have the capabilities. It's not like HUD do not have the capabilities. So like I said, it was a big burdensome on the families. We had to go to the hotels, and I'm seeing this actually more around in my local community. Okay, one of the buildings that I'm helping right now is called Glorietta Gardens Apartments. They were on the news here. I don't know if anyone heard of it. Every time there's a flood, these residents on the first floor is being flooded out. Okay, serious issues. Our local governor office, Marco Rubio, he's been out to the building. He's fully aware. They're fully aware of what's happening there. So like I say, the tenant organizing, the Section 514, is very important. It's very important because like I say, I do not get a dime. I don't get $1. And it makes it harder for me sometimes, I can't, sometimes printing, the ink, the papers, the flyers, it's so much. When I say it's a lot in tenant organizing to bring awareness to the physical conditions here that is not up to par. Even financially so, your time, even just with your time, it's a lot of time in this. When I say it's a lot of time, it's a lot of time. I get several calls a week, and I'm not getting no dollars for this. I mean, I'm spending my own gas going different places to do what I need to do. So at the end of the day, like I say, it is well needed. Very well needed. If HUD would have given the funds, a lot of families would not be displaced, would have been displaced. So I think stop there and pass it back over to Bridgett or Cal.
And can I just add to Shalonda's point? So Section 514, as I mentioned, can be used to help build capacity or to fund capacity building programs. So right now, some of the Section 514 funding that HUD has allocated is actually helping to fund, we call it a VISTA program for short, but it's actually VAP. So throughout the country, there are, I think, 15 to 10 fellows who are placed with local community organizations. And the Section 514 money is providing essentially a salary for these organizers who are housed in local organizations. And so these organizers through the program have a set, there's a criteria of properties in which they can work. One of which are properties that are facing poor conditions, as Shalonda mentioned. And so these fellows have the opportunity to learn about the federal housing programs, in particular, the project-based rental assistance programs. They also develop their substantive knowledge as well as skill knowledge about how to support families who live in properties that are either facing a loss of subsidy due to an owner's decision to opt out, or a potential where these buildings have mortgages still and there's a potential maturity of the mortgage, or where, as in Shalonda's example, the property has a failing REACT score. Like these fellows are full-time employees of the organizations in which they work. They provide the technical and substantive knowledge that they have to help support residents. So I saw a comment in the chat, or a question in the chat, about like, how do you galvanize residents and help them to understand the importance of building this or coming into the organization and building this type of collective power. And that's one of the reasons why Section 514 funding is so essential to the project-based rental assistance program, is because you essentially can help fund folks who will go out and will do this as their full-time job. You know, I shared with Shalonda, it's difficult for a resident to do this. One, because as Shalonda mentioned, it requires so much of your time, right? And you have other life obligations that you have to tend to. And if HUD is not funding these opportunities to build resident capacity, it really can be difficult for residents to connect with one another, to understand that as an organization, they can build community power and really hold whoever to task, whether that be the person who owns the property, whether it be HUD, whether it be local stakeholders. So the funding is really about acknowledging that residents are the most important stakeholder in all of this, right? When we talk about racial equity and creating more just housing system, like, it has to start with residents. They are closest to the harm, as folks like to say. And it's just important to acknowledge all of the work and the effort that they do without this funding. And then in the public housing context, to continue to properly fund those who are involved with the resident council. Shalonda, I'm going to pass it back to you since you have your hand up.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I'm sorry. One of the things I was just going to say, I believe you say there was a question in the chat. Yeah, a lot of time. One of the things, the first, I would say, you know, in getting residents to understand the importance of tenant organizing and how important it is and why it's so important, is that door-to-door knocking. You got to go door to door. Some residents are going to slam the door in your face. They're going to say, hey, we don't want to speak. We don't want to talk. That's fine. But if you get, you know, 30% or 40% of the building, it's still fine. You're never going to have, you know, 100% tenant participation. Everyone have their own reasons to why or whatever, but it's difficult. Believe me, it's difficult, but it can be done. And so I just wanted to say that it's very difficult, but however, I still keep fighting because I know it's so important. And as Ms. Bridgett said about the vistas, the VAP, right? In my area, there is no agency or group that I could go to that has a vista. So once again, it's so important to have your local community non-tenant organizer or organizers to do this and to help out. So I just wanted to say that's another reason why it's so important also for HUD to include non-tenant organizers like myself. I don't have an agency to go to. I know they do fund the agencies such as Vistas, but a person like myself is not, we're not being funded, but however, they're adding burdensome to the to residents like myself, or they're just adding the burdensome increasingly. And like I say, with the COVID, it's even more complicated, because now one of the things we're running into is that we're hearing a lot of residents are saying, and it's even here, oh, the landlord is saying our community rooms are closed. They're not opening the community rooms back up to residents. So how are we able to organize at this point? We have to use Zoom. And as we know, sometimes with Zoom, you do have to pay for Zoom. So how is this happening? So just think of these things, and I'll just go back on mute and pass it back over to Bridgett. Thank you for joining, Ms. Gerri, I see.
I was gonna say, thank you, Shalonda and Bridgett. I hope you can stick around because there's a lot of questions, but I wanted to give the esteemed Ms. Gerri Collins a chance to say a few words. I know this is an issue that's really important to her. So Ms. Gerri, if you wanna go ahead. I think you're still on mute.
You're on mute, Ms. Gerri. Unmute yourself, Ms. Gerri.
Yes, I'm sorry. You wanted me to speak about the money that should be available for tenant participation? Kyle? Yes, my name is Geraldine Collins, and I'm the president of the National Alliance of HUD Tenants, where Shalonda Rivers is also a board member of the National Alliance of HUD Tenants and the National Housing Low Income Coalition. We at HUD, we are looking for Ms. Fudge to ask Congress to put in at least $10 million a year toward tenant participation. And that money is going to be given out to different communities and different states, to different organizations to help organize tenants. Because right now we don't have any monies except for, I heard Shalonda said earlier, the VISTA program, which we don't have enough vistas to go around to help the troubled buildings that's going on right now. Because with what's going on since COVID, every owner is trying to find some ways of saying that they cannot organize. And I heard Shalonda's talking about the tenants not being able to organize because of COVID and not being able to use a community room. With that 514 money, we can help organizations get more money and get more people in their office to help tenants. Either it's virtually, and either if it's someone just to stop by and talk with the tenants outside if necessary, because right now a lot of owners are not letting the tenants back in yet. And I think it's a state by state thing. I'm not sure what HUD is saying, but we're meeting with Secretary Fudge on the 17th, and we're planning to bring these questions to her and see how we can help the tenants, because right now they need this money more than ever. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Gerri. I really appreciate that. I remember you brought that up when you joined us in January, so it's good to see you're still working on that legislation. For Bridgett, Shalonda, and Gerri, and Olivia, we have some questions that I wanted to go through. It's okay if you can't answer them, but maybe just to get the discussion going. So Tamara's mentioned several times in the chat, and I think this is an interesting question. How can we organize LIHTC? She mentioned that, it's not viewed in HUD's eyes as the same as other programs. I think it was Tamara that mentioned that if she went door to door, she would be considered harassing other tenants. So Bridgett, I don't know if you have any answer for that or anything.
Yeah, so I mentioned in the LIHTC program, it is administered by the Department of Treasury. And so they view the LIHTC as not a housing program. And so many of the protections that you would see in HUD programs are not always reflected in LIHTC. And one of those protections is the right to organize. And so I would say twofold. The first is to think about if your LIHTC building is just strictly LIHTC. There's no one there that has project-based rental assistance. This is not a LIHTC building that has been converted via RAD. So someone mentioned with RAD, the post-conversion. So in public housing properties that have undergone the RAD conversion process, the residents who were public housing residents that still live at the property that has converted via RAD, they still have the right to organize. And so I can share that notice with you. It's the RAD 4 notice, but essentially in that RAD 4 notice, it talks about the right to organize that families continue to enjoy after the properties have converted. And usually through RAD, to renovate the property, there's typically is a LIHTC deal involved, but if you live at a LIHTC property, you have to see what kind of subsidies are present at the property. If it was converted via RAD, once again, there are still right to organize rights that people still enjoy. If it is a LIHTC property that has a project-based rental assistance contract, those families that are PVRA have a right to organize. If you live in a property that's strictly LIHTC, that's where folks run into issues, right? Because as I mentioned, Treasury has not created this right to organize in the LIHTC property. And so that is one area that many advocates are looking to galvanize residents and to build a national interest, we'll say, in seeing that come to pass. So having the Department of Treasury codify the right to organize within their regulations for the LIHTC program.
Thanks, Bridgett. I think Laura Ramos, who's a good friend of NLIHC, asked about the 100% properties. And Laura, I would say we can talk offline since Laura's going to be writing a guest article for our next Tenant Talk publication about disability and housing justice. And I think that's something that she could definitely put in there about the ability to organize, because I know there's a good piece of advocacy around disability justice and LIHTC housing as well. So moving on to some more questions. Give me 1 second. I'd say to Shalonda, someone asked for your Cash App or Venmo if you feel comfortable sending that to them. They're anonymous attendees, so I can't give you their name, but they did ask that. Nakia asked, how could tenants advocate for required resident council training within the spirit of 964.140? Unlike Bertha Gilly, there are leaders in some jurisdictions operating in fear or confusion that they work for the PHA as unpaid volunteers with lack of knowledge about compensation, or belief that is only a social club to hand out turkeys. Bridgett, did you see this question?
Sorry, I'm scrolling back to try to find it.
It's in the Q&A box at the top.
So this is an issue that we hear about frequently in terms of folks wanting to be more involved in the resident council, but there's some tension between the membership and the resident council leadership. And really, I would say HUD doesn't wade into those issues, and typically PHAs don't wade into those issues of trying to create this institution of trust within the resident council. They kind of just really leave it to the residents to figure it out. And so if someone is interested in learning what 964 says and what 964 provides in terms of protections, there are some local legal organizations that do provide kind of like know your rights trainings that I'm sure would be happy to do that. There is a national organization called Narsau. They also provide training to public housing residents regarding their right to participate as described in 964. You know, sometimes I know folks are a little hesitant to attend the training that is conducted by the housing authority, but sometimes housing authorities are willing to either put on those trainings themselves or contract it out to have someone else, like a third party, to do those type of trainings. And so I would say the PHA, I mentioned earlier that the PHA keeps 10 of the $25 per occupied unit. That money that the PHA uses is to be spent on administrative costs that are associated with resident participation activities. So something like a training could well be covered with that $10.
Thanks, Bridgett. Chris O'Hara asked, do you feel there would be greater flexibility in service dollars for people who move on from homeless housing that can now go on to the state referral networks or to a housing voucher from a housing authority? Also, Shalonda has her hand raised. So Shalonda, if you want to chime in.
I'll just let Bridgett answer that question and then I'll chime in afterwards. I just wanted to speak in reference to the LIHTC.
Okay.
Okay.
You want to go ahead of me?
Sure. One thing as a non-tenant organizer and as a community organizer, one thing I learned in reference to LIHTC is that I'm here in Florida, and I did see someone ask, can LIHTC landlords subject the right to organize given by the state by state law, like New Jersey? Here where I'm at, what I did, I requested a copy of their agreement. Each LIHTC property, they have, by their state, they have an agreement. I pulled that agreement and I went through it to see what the agreements was and what they supposed to be doing. And if I find that they were not doing what they were supposed to do, that was another way that I organized. I made a complaint. So, you know, even if your LIHTC building is not, you know, able to organize, pull the agreement. And even if you speak to a neighbor and if you all find they're not doing what they're supposed to do, send in an anonymous a complaint or a letter if you want to stay anonymous, yourself and a neighbor, or, you know, I always encourage to definitely put in comments or, you know, whatever you may want to call it, or a complaint. And, you know, that I see that as a little way of, I won't say secretly organize it, right? But I don't want no one to get in trouble by their landlord. But that is a way that I learned to do some of the things here, is just pulling the agreement and reading it in reference to the LIHTC. Thank you.
So the question about greater flexibility in service dollars, I don't think I could really answer that question. Yeah, I don't think I could answer that question because I'm not quite sure what we mean by service dollars in regards to resident organizing.
With plenty of other questions, so we can get to that.
So,
sorry,
sorry to cut you off, but just to kind of circle back to the housing choice vouchers, I see that's kind of been a theme in the chat. So in the housing choice voucher program, there isn't a codified right to organize in the voucher regulations. And but I would say voucher families do have a right to be represented, their view and their perspective. They have a right for that to be represented in the resident advisory board. And so for those who are a little unfamiliar with the public housing side of the HUD portfolio is, so the resident advisory board, they are the resident group that works to elevate resident voices in regards to the PHA plans. So annually, the PHA has to update their annual PHA plans. They usually also update their ACOP as well as their administrative plans. So the RAB, what we call it for short, they are to be the tenant voices. They're to convey to residents what are the changes that the public housing is intending to make, take their comments and share it back with the PHA. So voucher families have a right to their voices, their perspective to be reflected in the RAB membership. Also, I mentioned that most public housing boards will have a assistant resident serve as a member of the board. And so that person who is assisted can be someone who is assisted through public housing or assisted through vouchers. So there are other mechanisms in which voucher residents can have their voices heard through the PHA or to the PHA. But when I say they don't have a right to organize, I mean that HUD has not acknowledged, explicitly stated this right in the housing choice voucher regulations.
Thanks, Bridgett. I wanted to point out something that John Leary put in the chat. I think this is helpful. This could be helpful to a lot of people. He said that in Philadelphia, there are various departments, agencies, et cetera, including a Philly code for all appropriate building codes, et cetera. These agencies are available to present problems. Perhaps anyone can visit Philly or PHILA, so PHILA.gov to get an idea, which then could possibly be used in any location to create a new program or a copycat technique. So related to that, I'd also say, if you're not a member of our Facebook group, NLIHC Tenant Talk, I'd recommend you get on there and, you know, people can ask questions like this and connect with other people in other places and see if you can get some best practices or answer questions, things like that.
Sorry, I hate to cut you off, but then also John put another comment in the chat about a campaign for the National Tenants Bill of Rights that has will launch June 10th. And so I just want to flag that for folks who are interested in learning more about what folks are doing to create this collective power at a national level.
Absolutely. Chris O'Hara also, sorry, Ms. Gerri.
I wanted to mention something I saw in the chat about the VISTA program.
Sure, go ahead.
Somebody wanted some information about the VISTA program.
Yes, I was actually going to ask that next, so please go ahead.
The National Alliance of HUD Tenants, we have two VISTA programs. One is called the VAP program, which is now in progress. And that program, the VISTAs cannot organize in certain buildings. And because of the bylaws and agreement that we have with our intermediary, this VISTA project, they cannot lobby or anything like that. But we have a new program called the Safe and Healthy Homes, where those VISTAs can work in any properties. They can work in public housing, they can work in market rate housing, and we are now taking applications for that project. So if anyone that's interested in a VISTA, you can contact the National Alliance of HUD Tenants or myself, Gerri Collins. I'll put the information in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Gerri. So I wanted to respond to Chris had another question about when will the right to counsel and eviction court be lifted up within NLIHC. I can say that that is a key priority of our House campaign, and we fully support any state and local efforts to do that. We highlight any of those in our weekly memo to members. If you're not receiving that, please let us know and we can add you to that list. But yeah, right to counsel is, we believe, a huge component of all of this, and we're definitely willing to lift up that. And so Olivia just posted our House campaign link in the chat, so you can check that out. I think this is a question maybe for another brainstorm, but Tamara and I think several other people are getting at the need to have a concerted advocacy effort to have all these programs have the right to organize. And I think Bridgett and Ms. Gerri and Shalonda, I think you'd all agree probably with that. So that might be something that we work on later. I'm sure that there have been efforts in the past to do this, but I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know the full history of NLIHC or NHLP, but happy to work on that for sure, because that is egregious that you can't do that.
So can I just put a little plug in?
Yeah.
So we haven't started this thought process in and around the low-income housing tax credit program, but the National Housing Law Project, as well as in partnership with PRAC, have drafted a potential proposal for what a right to organize could look like in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. So I'll include a link here for you all to look at our draft proposal. I would love to hear back from you all to hear where perhaps we have missed the mark or where we are spot on. But essentially, this is just an initial draft. It's just a proposal, but we are interested in hearing from folks about what a right to organize could look like in the voucher program.
Thanks, Bridgett. So we'll do a couple more questions because we have some housekeeping that we have to do towards the end, but I did see one that I wanted to call out. So I think this is something that Ms. Gerri, Bridgett, and Shalonda, you can all answer. Sherry Pendlebury asked, are PHA maintenance men allowed to sneakily photograph the repairs in your apartment, or is this a vague area? And Shalonda, I know you and I had a discussion about that with cameras, but I guess I don't know if photographs are different for repairs or something like that. Or...
Could you repeat the question one more time, please?
Yeah. Are PHA maintenance men allowed to sneakily photograph their repairs in your apartment, or is this a vague area?
Once again, I live in multifamily, but however, PHAs, I don't believe it is legal for them to come in and secretly photograph. In my state of Florida, and it varies state by state, and Bridgett, you could correct me if I'm wrong. Each state have their own rules, right? And for my apartment complex, when the landlord comes in, we, the residents, was outsmarting them. So they started getting smart and started doing what we were doing. When they were coming in, we would tell them we were recording you all, or we were going to take pictures of you all, right? And so they started giving us notice saying, hey, photographs may be taken, right? But once again, remember, they can't take photographs of your pictures. They can't take photographs of your children. But no, not secretly. I think anything that they do, they're supposed to let you know publicly, let you know openly. And one of the things that I did find here is that where I'm assisting in another property is that be aware is that what some of the maintenance guys and office staff is doing, they're actually purchasing body cameras and wearing it in. And I was surprised, like, what? So my thought on that would be, no, not secretly record. So Bridgett, if you want to step in.
Yeah, so when someone enters your unit, they are to give you notice. Ideally, I believe they're supposed to at least give you 24-hour notice unless it's an emergency that needs to be repaired. So in some instances, HUD will ask the housing provider to provide documentation or proof that they have made repairs. So for instance, let's say there is a hole in drywall, and during the physical inspection, the REAC inspection, the inspector says, hey, there is a huge hole in your drywall that needs to be fixed. And the property owner goes through and fixes the drywall, and so there's no longer a hole. Sometimes HUD will say you need to provide us documentation that you've fixed or proof that you fixed this deficiency. And so things like that, they're supposed to take a picture of their work or provide other types of documentation that they have addressed the deficiency. So, you know, in terms of entering your unit, they should be giving you notice. In terms of taking pictures, I would second what Shalonda says, like they shouldn't be taking pictures of your children, taking pictures of your things, that it should be very transparent why they're in the unit and what they're taking pictures of and for what use.
Piggybacking on what Bridgett just said, part of this is the invasion of your civil rights as far as, you know, them coming in, but you have to give notice. Like Bridgett said, you must give notice first before entering a tenant's apartment. And it's usually 24 to 48 hours. It only in an emergency, like a water leak or something like that. That's an emergency. But other than that, a tenant should be notified before anybody enters that apartment. But they should be told as soon as they come in the apartment that they will have to take a picture of the work that they are doing, only that picture. And that tenant should stand there and watch them take a picture. No other areas they should be taking pictures of in that apartment.
Hey, Ms. Gerri, I hate to put you on the spot, but do you want to talk about the NAHT empowerment bill?
Yes, I was going to get to that, but I didn't know whether Kyle was ready for that yet. Okay, Kyle, Shalonda Rivers and myself, we testified before Congress in 2019 around the tenant empowerment bill. And this bill has a lot of things in it would help a lot of tenants. And part of it is the rent withholding. And when we say rent withholding, it's we're looking at landlords that's letting some of these buildings become so terrible that they can't really fix them. And now we have buildings that they're giving pass-through leases in order for the tenants to get some type of remedy. Now we're asking HUD to withhold their subsidy and for the tenants to withhold their subsidy, which is a small amount, but the tenants will put their money in escrow. That's the main thing. They will put the money in escrow. And this is not, we're not taxing every landlord. We're only taxing those landlords that let those buildings fall below 60. Like Shalonda building, I think it's a 21C, which they should have had a new owner a long time ago. We're holding HUD accountable and saying, listen, we need you to hold that money back because the majority of the money that HUD is getting, the landlord are getting is from HUD. The money that they're getting from the tenants is a measly a little bit of money. So if we get that with HUD to withhold that money, then they will be hurting their pockets. Another thing is that we are looking at the repair and deduct, the right for Section 8 tenants. When tenants have problems in their apartment and they wait forever for someone to come and repair it, we're asking HUD to give them the right to go ahead and repair that and for the owners to give them their money back or deduct it from their rent. And we're also asking that a tenant could trigger what they call an MOR or REACT. REACT is Real Estate Assessment Center, and the MOR is Management and Occupancy Review. A tenant can trigger any of these inspections if they see something going on in their building. The Management and Occupancy Review covers mainly the management part of the building. And they look into the tenant's records to make sure that the tenants are being certified on time. And if not, they get an inspection. They do a total inspection with the REACT, but on the MOR, they can at least put 3 or 4 apartments that they can ask to go to see what is going on in that building also. So you have 2 types of inspections, the MOR, which is the Management and Occupancy Review, and the Real Estate Assessment Center, which is the REACT. That REACT covers the whole apartment. And HUD has changed a lot of that. And I think a lot of people will be hearing about this new thing that HUD has called the Inspire model. And we're also asking access to information for a property budget and repair plan. When they're getting ready to do certain work, like the LIHTC, when they got ready to do LIHTC in certain buildings, tenants knew nothing about what was going on. So we're asking the property owner to asking HUD to give us access to those records. And we're also asking for a third-party enforcement right for tenants' contracts, because a lot of things that they have in our records and stuff does not cover. A lot of people have problems with that wait list, because the wait list sometime, I guess, it's people get bumped up on the wait list. So we're asking for information on that wait list too, to see where certain tenants are. And we're also asking for HUD to at least ask Congress, as I said earlier, they can bring down to $10 million a year for tenant participation. And we need this money to help organize. We cannot do without this money. This money has been sitting there for years, and they've been using it for different projects. We were instrumental in getting some of this money for the Vista project. And I saw someone said in the chat about the Vistas being, I guess, rich people or whatever. They are not. They're very poor people. And we find that the Vistas live in the same community that you live in. And we at NAHT, we try to encourage the people that's getting the Vistas, the people that live in your building become a Vista. A tenant can become a Vista. And we prefer seeing tenants having those jobs versus other people, because we are the one that live in these buildings. We are the eyes and ears of HUD. So who else better to know what's going on in these property than the tenants themselves? So we asking that in your state, all the senators, all of your Congress people, please, this bill is about to come to the floor, and we're asking, and we're going to be pushing with the National Income Coalition, Housing Coalition, to push this bill through so that tenants can get some type of remedy. Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks, Ms. Gerri. I would love to continue this conversation, but to be respectful of everybody's time. And we have some pretty important housekeeping things to go over. So thank you so much, Bridgett, Shalonda, and Ms. Gerri, for everything you said. And I've seen several people in the chat ask us. We will definitely send out all these links. But before I go on to that housekeeping stuff that I mentioned, I wanted to give a quick update on where the infrastructure negotiations are currently. So if you listen to today's national call, you can tune out for the next minute or so. But I just wanted to give a quick update that the Republicans have met with Joe Biden recently, and they claim that they're inching closer on a deal. I obviously don't really believe that. But Senator Betancourt has said that there's going to be about 10 days before Democrats move forward with a reconciliation bill that would pass without Republican support. However, a wrench in that is that Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia has said that he's not ready to give up on a bipartisan deal. So in an effort to kind of address his concerns, President Biden backed off of a 28% corporate tax rate and lowered it down to 15%, but with greater enforcement from the IRS. And so I'll leave it there, and I'll put our take action form in the chat where you can sign your organization on to a national letter urging Congress to include the $318 billion that has been promised in this infrastructure package. We would really appreciate if you're in a resident board or any type of local, state or local organization, please feel free to sign on. Okay, so I have something very important to tell everyone on this call, and I'll also send out an email since not everyone that attends Tenant Talk Live will be on the call, but I will be leaving the coalition on Friday, so this will be my last Tenant Talk Live. I will be attending grad school in the fall, and I wanted to introduce Sidney, who is a new field team member. She'll be taking over, I believe, after Olivia. I don't know if Olivia's announced this could be there, but Olivia's also going to grad school in the fall as well. So Sidney, if you wanted to quickly introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, hi, of course. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great. So my name is Sidney Betancourt, born and raised in Las Vegas and East Las Vegas. And I recently moved to DC about a year ago to complete a fellowship with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, working on housing policy on a federal level. So I'm really excited to be on the organizing side just because I get to work with all of you folks. I'm getting to interact with people on the ground, which I really enjoy. So really excited to be working with you all.
Thanks,
We're
Sydney.
gonna miss you, Kyle.
I just want, yeah, thank you, Mr. I just want to say before I leave, this was a kind of a, not harebrained project, but it was kind of just we threw something on the wall and see if it would stick. And I'm really proud of what this has become. I think our first Tenant Talk Live only had about 10 participants, and now we get up to about 70 or 80. So I'm pretty proud of that. And I hope that you all continue the great work that we've done in this. And there's actually going to be, yes, Linda, this was my baby. I was very passionate about this program this project. So I will definitely be tuning in to make sure that Sidney does a good job, which I'm sure she will after I leave. But yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone. If you want to reach out to me, feel free to. And I'll be following up with something else that moving forward, I think will be a good addition to Tenant Talk. With that, I will give you all your night back. And thank you again to Bridgett, Shalonda, and Miss Gerri again. And thank you everyone who's been congratulating me. I really appreciate it. So have a good night, everyone.
Take care.